As a 27-year-old with most of my 20s behind me, I did not think that this book would be a good choice for me. But I learned about it recently and it looked interesting, so I thought I'd give it a try. Today we are talking about The Defining Decade by Dr. Meg Jay, why your 20s matter and how you can make the most of them. Dr. Meg Jay is also a psychologist, and there is a tone of urgency and a tone of how you should be taking action and just, something that is propelling you in the right direction and making you think very, very consciously about the decisions that you are making. This book is very strong on their point that your 20s are the most defining period of your life. This is when you take all of your major life decisions, whether it is about going to university, pursuing higher education, the kind of career that you want to take, your first job, maybe your first serious relationship, maybe starting your own family or finding your life partner and deciding the place where you want to live in, the kind of work that you want to do, what your purpose in life is, and a myriad of other choices. And since this is the most formative time in your adult life, you have to pay more attention to it. You have to be very, very intentional with all of the choices that you make. It is okay to wait for certain life events until you are ready, but it should be a choice and not the default option. And she said something which struck a chord with me, which said that 2/3 of your wage growth will happen in the first 10 years of your career. And assuming we are somebody who's pursuing like a conventional career, your college education would roughly end in your early 20s and then you get your first job. And from that point on, you have 10 years to achieve like 2/3 of the wage growth that you're going to make in your entire life, and that is your retirement fund, and that kind of forms the basis of your lifestyle, the kind of livelihood you can afford to give your next generation, your own family, your parents. So there are a lot of things that depend on how you lead these first 10 years of your employment, which will incidentally fall in your 20s majorly. So this book is divided into 3 parts: work, love, and brain and body, and each of these parts are further divided into different chapters which describe a key concept that she's trying to tell the readers about. And I will tell you what I found the most interesting from each of the parts. There are a few concepts which are really unconventional, and at least I had not heard about it before reading this book, and I thought they were very valuable. So the first point within work is something called the power of weak ties. This is kind of in line with what I've heard all my life. As soon as you get out of school and get into any kind of college or any internship, any job, everybody tells you to network. And that, for somebody who might not be very social or might not be an extrovert, it's also a very intimidating concept. And you are expected to talk to people who are far ahead in their careers, way senior to you, way older to you, and sometimes they might not even respond, and there is nothing you can do or there's nothing they can do. It's just like, everybody has their own lives if we don't know what's happening. But just to even get a good perspective of the kind of jobs that you want to do, get a good overall idea of your career, get a good hold of what your career path can look like, what a particular company is like, you will not understand these things if you are not talking to people. And that is kind of where I thought concepts that Dr. Meg Jay talked about that came into play, because she talked about the power of weak ties, which is basically when you might not have a direct connection, but maybe say you met somebody at an internship and they have a family friend who worked in a company where you wanted to work in, and you maybe caught up with them over lunch or something for one day. They will be at your level or maybe a little few years senior, and then they are also in that company where you want to work, and you get a very clear and honest, candid perspective from them. If you can connect with people who are not in your direct circle, then it also opens your mind a lot. You get a lot of different perspectives from people, you understand a lot of different thought processes, and you also explore a lot more than you normally would. She also highlights how people in their 20s are really ambitious, but they also need to be very realistic. Like she says that you have to understand you can be really ambitious and you can have big lofty goals, but you also have to be realistic enough to understand that all of it will not come into your 20s. But if you have that clear path defined, you also need to lay down the foundations for that life, that vision of yours to be successful later in your life. Like if you don't build the foundations in your 20s, then you might not achieve it in your 40s. If you do it right, you might get there sooner. So you have to understand what career you might want and what might your dream job be, and understanding all of that. Once you do your research, once you network with the right people, you also need to figure out what are the skills that you need, and then work towards building them up, work towards becoming the person, this ideal version of yourself which is capable of having that role, which is capable of doing that job that you are thinking in your mind. She's very realistic about the kind of results that you can expect in a certain period of time, but that does not mean that you wait until your 30s to start figuring out what you want to do with your life. That is what she means by being very intentional with your time. Once you realize that your time is so valuable, you actually use these formative years, these experiences, and this time and this network to understand what is the right path for you. And finally, she also says it's very, very important to not compare yourself with others and their social media highlight reel. When every time you open LinkedIn, someone's getting promoted, someone's getting a new job, someone's getting a raise, and it's just all over the place. And obviously, if you are somebody who is not having that great time at work, or is probably not in the work that is right for you, you feel down every time you see that. So don't compare. Like, you don't know how difficult it was and how many sleepless nights they pulled to get that promotion or to get that raise. We don't know that, and we don't know anyone's life other than our own as closely. So it doesn't make any sense to compare someone else's highlight reel with our day-to-day life. Next, we move on to love. This part is written from a Western point of view. It seems like the author is from USA and also interacts with most people from USA as well. So this, I don't know, as an Indian, a lot of it would not be very accurately applicable, but there were still a few takeaways for me from this section. This part basically talks about being very intentional in your relationships. We don't get to pick the family that we are born in, but this is the family that we are going to have for the remainder of our lives, is something that we do get to pick. You have to understand what is it that you want in a relationship, and what is it that you are asking from your partner in a relationship, and is it that something that the people that you're choosing, are they able to give that to you at all or not? And if they're not, then identifying that quickly in the relationship and then letting it go, and not wasting your time or their time, because clearly you are not the right partner for them either. But she talks about her clients who were with multiple unsuitable partners because they had a wrong opinion of themselves, or they were kind of hung up on an older version of them. She calls it dating down, which doesn't mean like dating down as in from a social point of view or from a very superficial point of view, but dating down as in she meant dating somebody from the perspective of an older version of you, like something you are not currently. Like, this happens to a lot of people who go through a huge, like a massive weight loss transformation, and they, in their mind, they kind of still find themselves unattractive and undesirable, and they find partners who do not value their other qualities. Like, they only find partners who validate their insecurities, and that kind of leads to an unsuccessful relationship, of course. So that is what she's saying, that take this time in your 20s and understand what is it that you want and what is it that you are expecting from your partner, and so that you can have a suitable partner and like a successful relationship going on in the future. She also talks about cohabitation, which is not super common in India, but more people are doing it than before. And I personally agree with the author's perspective here, but I know a lot of people will probably not. So let me know in the comments if you don't. What she's saying is that a lot of couples kind of start dating and then they move in together because it is convenient, and then they think that the next logical step is to get married, so they get married. But those marriages are mostly not successful, and majority of those end in divorces. Once you get into cohabitation as a form of convenience, then there is no clear boundary between you and your partner, and how things are supposed to change once you're engaged or once you're married, and whose responsibilities what, who is bringing what to the table. And I mean in terms of all kinds of responsibilities like household or financial, and what you are doing for each other's families and everything. So all of these things, that these discussions are usually not had when you are kind of just dating, and then you slip into the moving in stage, and then you just slide into marriage. If you are being very intentional about getting married to somebody, and while you are living together, or maybe you start living together after you are engaged and after you've had these conversations, those couples have found more success than the other kind. So that is what she's saying, is that there's no harm and there's no direct like correlation between people living together and then getting married as opposed to not living together before marriage. But it is all coming down to a question of, are you intentional with that decision, or is it just because it's easy, it's convenient, and there is no other option, or that is the default choice that you are making. The next part is called the brain and the body. So here what she says is we need to build the foundations for all of the skills that we're going to need later in life. Like this is the time when we start building the long-term skills. This is the time when we pay attention to our habits, the routines that we have that help us lead like mostly a healthy lifestyle, how we can build that up, and what are the habits that we should be doing every day so that we stay mentally and physically fit, and the skills that we need to build to have what is the career that we are dreaming of. Also, the brain is much more elastic in your 20s than later in your life, so this is the time when whatever you want to learn, you should spend a lot of time learning, because this is the time that can shape your brain and you can like absorb more information, you can implement it better. In terms of the brain, this was it. In terms of the body, what I found most surprising is this chapter called Everybody, and if you are a woman watching this video, I think you must read that part. It basically talks about fertility, and I have not seen any of the other self-help book actually mention this. Most books are structured around like productivity, time management, you know, doing really well in your career, those sort of things, and also like physical health and fitness and stuff. But even within the realm of physical health, nobody actually talks about this part of it. I thought this was really refreshing, and probably because she's a woman and she's a psychologist, this is something that has probably come up in some sessions. A lot of people, she's saying, are looking to have kids later and later in life, because that's when they think they're financially ready, and that's when they're stable in life, and that's when they feel ready, which is okay. But something that we need to keep in mind, and I did not realize that the difference was so much, that your chances of having a child in your 20s is like some 25% per cycle, and that plummets to like maybe 5% per cycle when you hit your 40s. So even within your 30-35 age range, that is somewhere around 10 to 15%, which is a huge drop, and I did not even think about it at all actually. And this was very surprising news to me, and considering how many people are thinking of having children later in life, this is some information that might be relevant. So that was the book summary, guys. I think this book is for 20-somethings who are looking to have a very conventional life, basically like a stable corporate job, regular conventional family life, get married, have kids, save for retirement, that sort of thing. If you're trying to have an unconventional life, I don't know how much of this you can take away from it, but it was definitely a lot of good solid information. And the way it's structured, it's also like she had some clients who face these troubles, and that's where she picks up this real life examples and incidents and explains that concept. So it was very easy to read. I finished it in a weekend, and it was very like a conversational style of writing, so that was really nice. I had already mentioned, being an Indian, this is a pretty Western version of things. It doesn't really take into account how you would deal with your family, for example, like not just the chosen family but also your existing family, which is a big deal for most Indians. A lot of responsibility towards the family, and there is also a lot of influence that elders in the family have on you, so that is also something that you would have to consider if you are an Indian reading this book. But overall, this is a book which is packed with information. It's also not written in like a preachy way that you'd feel like they're lecturing you, neither is it written in a style that you don't feel any need to take action. I think this is the right book if you are earlier in your 20s and you're kind of trying to shape your life from there. This is not the book to follow for like a roadmap and do a step-by-step plan of how to make the most of your 20s, but it's definitely a good handbook to have and just like get an idea of the major concepts that you need to be aware of when you are, you know, thinking about your work life, your personal life, and your mental and physical health. So these are a few things that I thought about the book. If you have read it, please let me know in the comments down below how you liked it, and if you would recommend it to a friend or not, and what was your favorite takeaway from this book. Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next week. Bye.